We're joined by Solange Mogin for Press Review. Hello, Solange.
Hi, Salam.
This weekend was marked by another weekend, a fifth of protests here in France by the Yellow Vest movement. But we've also seen them sleep over across the border to Belgium, but those ones turned violent.
Well, actually, this was a protest by the far-right party that was called not because of the Yellow Vest movement, but because of Belgium's decision to sign the UN migration pact. In Brussels, over 5,000 members from the far-right parties came out in the streets to protest the signing of this pact. Our anger can now be heard. That's the front page headline of the Belgian paper De Morgen. The paper explains that the rally, which was called for by a far-right party, turned violent after protesters began throwing projectiles. Le Soir says that the police actually had to break up the rally, which was actually initially banned by authorities over fears of unrest. But then the country's administrative court overruled that ban. Now, it's important to note as well that there was a counter-protest of around 1,000 people that came out in favor of the signing of this pact. Now, the issue of the migrant pact has really been divisive and politically volatile for many countries, but especially for Belgium. The government's decision to sign it actually broke up the prime minister's majority coalition. Charles Michel managed to form a minority government, but El País, the Spanish paper, reminds us that the fact that the Flemish Nationalist Party backed out over the UN pact and that this far-right protest took place are signs of just how divisive the issue is in parts of Europe. Even with a pact that is essentially just a roadmap, it's not legally binding for countries.
Now, speaking of protests, we saw thousands take to the streets in Hungary over the weekend, chanting anti-government slogans. But in their case, it was about the new labor laws.
Yeah, this is actually one of the largest protests against Viktor Orban since he was elected in 2010. And Sunday's protest was actually the fourth this last week. Around 10,000 people came out to voice their anger against Orban's government and new laws that would allow companies, now get this, to demand 400 hours of overtime and be able to delay payment of those hours for up to 3 years. Now, the opposition is calling it the slave law, and it isn't the only gripe that has riled up protesters against Viktor Orban. Bloomberg explains that the protesters are also demanding a free press, and they held an overnight sit-in at a TV station to try and make sure that their voices can be heard as well as the government's voice. And they even vowed to emulate the Yellow Vest movement. Yet Orban is still plowing ahead with his right-wing nationalist views. The French paper La Croix explains that Orban wants to re-Christianize the country, and he's actually encouraged the church to take control of schools, which are for the most part run by local authorities, a step towards a lack of religious freedom that is sure to cause outrage among Hungary's opposition parties.
Let's move away from these anti-government protests in Europe to a summit that drew to an end over the weekend in Poland. That's a COP24, of course. And they came up with something that's been dubbed somewhat of a victory. A deal was signed.
Yeah, it has been dubbed a victory because a deal was signed, but some people, some countries, some activists, and much of the press are saying that the environmental rulebook that was signed didn't go far enough politically. Now, La Repubblica, the Italian paper, says the deal was, quote, the big bluff on the environment. The Italian paper faults European nations for not joining together enough and really fighting for more stringent measures to fight climate change. Yet some editorialists say there is hope. The Guardian agrees that the pact is weak, but they argue that the compromise that was struck is still a sign of hope. And they say, in essence, it's all we've got, so we've got to go with it.
We've got to go with it. We've got to go with China now, of course, and their forced labor laws and the lack of religious rights have been the subject of a New York Times article this Monday. Yeah,
the Times is bringing our attention today to Muslim inmates in internment camps in Western China, many of whom are part of the Uyghur minority. Now, the plight of these people has been making headlines and causing much outrage for some time. But here's what's new. It's how China is dealing with the pushback. The Times explains that there's been a surge of sort of upbeat propaganda coming from Beijing, that they're saying that tens of thousands of Muslims are actually in job training programs and that those programs help them escape poverty. But the Times says not so fast. The so-called training centers are actually slave labor factories, and the camps are meant to brainwash Chinese minorities from believing in their own religion.
I want to end on a lighter note if we can, and maybe you can explain this to me because I don't understand what's happening here. Big victory for France yesterday in handball.
Well, it's important to note that France is a big handball country. People follow handball. But yes,
absolutely, my producer does, and
yes.
she plays it, in fact.
Last night, there was an on-the-edge-of-your-seat match between France and Russia. France beat Russia 24-21 to become the European champions. This is the first time in their history that they've done so. And L'Équipe reminds us that this has actually been a really good year for the team. 12 months ago, they won the World Championships, and all this victory is all the more sweeter because the Russian team beat out the French team at the last Olympics. Russia won gold and France silver. Now, L'Humanité also tells us that part of this glory is also thanks to the French Handball Federation. They say, the Luma says that through the federation's egalitarian politics, it has made it a priority for the women's team to be treated just as well as the men's team. And so I guess here you could say that sort of politics have kind of paid off.
In one case, politics pays off. Thank you very much for that press review, Solange. Of course, if you want to catch up with the stories that Solange has been bringing us, you can go to our website. That's www.france24.com.